go to the third part of this study. Paul openly admitted his error. Paul openly admitted his error. It's in Acts chapter 23 from verse 1. And Paul, earnestly beholding the council, said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God unto this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded them that stood by him to smite him on the mouth. Paul was talking about a good conscience before God. He said, I've lived before God in all good conscience unto this day. And then the high priest Ananias told somebody, smite him, slap him, deal with him. Then Paul said unto him, verse 3, God shall smite thee, thou whitest wall, for sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commanded me to be smitten contrary to the law. He was saying, so you are commanding that someone should smite me? He now said, thou whitest wall. And they that stood by, verse 4, said, revilest thou God high priest? They quickly told Paul, Paul, you are an apostle. Don't you know the scripture? Don't you know that this man that is giving us this instruction is an high priest? Revilest thou God high priest? See what Paul did in verse 5. Then said Paul, I wist not, I know not, brethren, that he was the high priest. I do not know that he was the high priest, for it is written, thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of thy people. Paul said and admitted openly his error. He quoted the scripture to say, I'm wrong. I shouldn't have spoken against the high priest. It may be just a traditional title, but it's a religious title. It's a title that God himself in the Old Covenant laid down. And so I have no justification. I have no audacity of any man, nor of any God, to speak evil of the high priest. He said, he quoted the Bible to fault himself. He quoted the Bible to point out the fault. He said, thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of thy people. He said, I'm wrong. Paul, when Peter was wrong, you pointed it out. Now that you are wrong, point it out. There are some pastors, they are only good in pointing out the errors of others. When it comes to their own error, they will not admit, they will not point it out. Paul did not excuse his error, but Paul admitted his error. Paul did not quote the Bible to exonerate himself of his error. No, Paul quoted the Bible to point out his own error. He quoted the scripture to point out his own wrong. Paul did not coerce the people to believe that he was always wrong. Paul did not coerce the people to believe that I am an infallible being. I am always led of God. There are things you have done that are not led of God. That is why you came back later and said, no, that is no more that way. It's not God that told you that other thing before. It's your passion. Maybe your passion. It's your knowledge. Maybe your knowledge. Your limited knowledge at that time. So coming back to God, it shows that it's actually your passion, your level of understanding at that time. God will never say a thing was wrong and now it is right. God will never say a thing was sin and now it is no longer sin. God will never say a thing was worldliness and now it is no longer worldliness. Most times, what we say or do is based on our limited understanding at that point. So, when God reveals to us that we are wrong, let's admit that we are wrong. Let's quote the Bible to point out our wrong, even like Paul did. Paul openly admitted his fault.